You got what you wanted. So why does it feel like nothing changed? There's a moment that many people experience but rarely speak about directly. A moment where something they spent time thinking about, working toward, or emotionally investing in finally becomes real. And instead of bringing the clarity or relief they expected, it creates a strange kind of silence inside them. Not an obvious disappointment, not a dramatic collapse of expectations, but a quiet, almost unnoticeable emptiness that does not match the importance they once placed on that outcome. It becomes confusing because everything on the surface makes sense. The goal was reached, the situation improved, the thing that once felt distant is now part of reality. And yet internally, there is no lasting shift that matches that external change. There might be a brief moment of satisfaction, a short sense of completion, but it fades quickly, leaving behind something that feels neutral or slightly hollow, as if the experience did not land in the way it was supposed to. Most people believe that achieving what they want will change something fundamental about how they feel, that it will stabilize them, complete something unresolved, or finally create a sense of certainty that lasts. But the mind does not operate based on the outcome itself. It operates based on the movement toward it, the process of anticipation, effort, and an uncertainty that keeps it engaged and focused. The emotional intensity is not in having the thing, it is in moving toward it, in the space where it is not yet decided, where possibilities still exist, where the outcome is open. That is where the mind feels active, where it feels like something is happening, where it has direction, and once that movement stops, something essential disappears with it. What disappears is not the goal, but the tension that came with pursuing it, the subtle pressure that kept your attention locked onto something, giving your thoughts a structure and your actions a direction. And when that tension is removed, there's a sudden drop in engagement that can feel like emptiness. Not because something is missing, but because something that was driving your focus is no longer there. This is why people often move quickly from one goal to another. Not because they are incapable of satisfaction, but because their mind is trying to restore that sense of movement, that sense of anticipation that keeps it engaged. Without it, there is a kind of stillness that feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar often gets interpreted as something being wrong. The pattern becomes repetitive without being obvious. You set something in motion, you move toward it, you feel engaged, you reach it, and then that engagement fades, creating a gap between what you expected and what you actually experience. Instead of recognizing that gap as part of the process, most people interpret it as a failure of the outcome itself. They begin to think they chose the wrong thing, expected too much, or missed something along the way, when in reality the structure of the experience was never designed to provide what they thought it would. The mind does not stay in a completed state for long, because completion removes uncertainty, and uncertainty is what keeps it stimulated. Uncertainty creates questions, possibilities, potential outcomes that have not yet been resolved. And that state holds your attention in a way that feels engaging. Once something becomes certain, once it is resolved and no longer in motion, that entire system quiets down, and what remains is stillness. For someone who is used to constant movement, constant thinking, constant anticipation, that stillness does not feel like peace. It feels like something has stopped, like something is missing, even though nothing actually is. And that is where emptiness begins. Not as a lack of something external, but as a reaction to the absence of internal movement. The mind, which has been trained to expect engagement, begins searching for something to replace it, something to restore that sense of direction. And this is where the next cycle begins. Sometimes it shows up as a new goal, something else to pursue, something to bring back that feeling of anticipation. Other times it shows up as dissatisfaction, a quiet sense that what you achieved should have felt different, that you should be happier, more fulfilled, more certain than you are. That expectation creates pressure, because now you are not just experiencing the outcome, you are evaluating it against an idea that was never fully grounded in reality. And the gap between expectation and experience is where dissatisfaction grows. Not because the outcome failed, but because it was expected to provide something it was never capable of sustaining. No external result can create a permanent internal state. It can shift your situation, remove certain problems, or create temporary changes in how you feel. But it cannot stabilize your internal experience in a lasting way. That stability does not come from what you achieve. It comes from how your mind relates to what you experience. And until that is understood, the pattern continues. You keep moving from one outcome to another, expecting each one to resolve something deeper. And when it doesn't, you assume the issue is with the outcome rather than the expectation. But the mind is not actually chasing the result. It is chasing the engagement, the sense of movement, the feeling that something is happening, and that it has a direction to follow. Once you see that clearly, the emptiness that follows achievement starts to make sense. Not as a failure, but as a natural shift from movement into stillness. And that shift only feels uncomfortable because it is unfamiliar. Because most people do not spend much time in that space before replacing it with something else. They move out of it quickly, setting a new goal, finding a new focus, restarting the cycle before they fully understand what is happening. But if you stay with that feeling, without immediately trying to escape it or replace it, something begins to change. The emptiness starts to feel less like a lack and more like space. Space that is not being filled by constant thinking, constant striving, constant anticipation. And within that space, something becomes clear, that what you were expecting from the outcome was never going to come from the outcome itself. Not because the goal was wrong, but because the expectation was placed in the wrong direction. That realization is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, almost subtle, but it changes how you move forward. Because now you are not chasing outcomes to fix how you feel. You are engaging with them without attaching your internal state to their completion. You can still pursue things, still move toward goals, still create direction in your life. But the pressure attached to the result begins to fade. Because you are no longer expecting it to complete something inside you, you are simply interacting with it as part of your experience. And that shift changes everything. Not because your life suddenly becomes perfect, but because the cycle that created that emptiness begins to lose its hold. You are no longer moving in the same loop, no longer expecting the same outcome to produce a different internal result. And when that happens, the emptiness that once followed achievement does not need to be filled, because you understand where it came from.